Nimit Sawhney is co-founder and CEO of Voatz. Nimit's background is in mobile security and development, previously serving as Director of Research and Development at Oberthur Technologies, and prior to that, as Director of Research and Development at MoreMagic Solutions. Nimit, you guys have been on the front lines of mobile voting and have taken a lot of heat for it. Can you talk about what kind of resistance that you run into?
Sure. The concerns we hear are primarily around regulation, legal aspects, and obviously security. There is a long-held perception that nothing on the internet can ever be safe. And so that is particularly highlighted when it comes to voting.
Well, that scares me because I do a lot of online banking and wire transfers online. So it sounds like an emotional response rather than a factual one. Why do you think that is?
There are some reasons behind it. Traditionally, attempts to vote online have been disrupted and compromised due to certain structural weaknesses. However, what has happened in the last few years is there have been certain technologies which have come up in other industries, which now actually, in our humble opinion, make it possible to make this safe enough. So that's why we've been at the forefront of pushing this hard.
So to me, it's a inevitable future. We will get there, but I get that there's resistance to it. But let's talk about the advantages of electronic voting. What do we actually stand to gain by improving the system?
I think the biggest advantage is wider participation, and in some cases, improved security as well. And also in the current situation where we find ourselves in a very unfortunate situation with the COVID-19 virus, it's actually a lot safer from a health perspective to vote from your home rather than have to stand in a line for hours like what happened in Wisconsin yesterday.
What are the actual challenges, though? What should we be worried about?
I think the biggest challenge when it comes to remote voting is being able to satisfy a few different criteria. The first one is, can you trust to a reasonable extent the device from which the voter is voting on? Second one is, can you, to a high degree of accuracy, prove the identity of the voter? Because when you're in person, you can see the person, you can mark them off a list, you can, in a scenario, also ask them for an ID. But in a remote scenario, just using a password and a username is not sufficient when it comes to voting. And then the third challenge is, how do you secure the data once it's been transmitted by the voter and then keep it in an auditable way so that it can sync with the existing system and also provide the advantages which some of these new technologies provide. So I would say those are the big challenges which have prevented any form of voting online from going mainstream in the past. And the folks who have solved that problem, the biggest one has been in Estonia, have been very successful at it, but the rest of the world has been lagging.
Nimit, to me, there's a huge difference between a complete move to mobile voting and incremental progress, like focusing on people with disabilities and absentee ballots, for example. But it seems to me there's equal resistance. Why is that?
Yeah, that's one of the things which has been really surprising to us as well. And I think once again, it comes from a sense of sort of emotional reaction. We've, as you rightly said, it's very important to try this using what we call as baby steps. So start really small. Start with the voting demographics, which are the most disadvantaged. So in the case of the US, it's the citizens living overseas, deployed military personnel, and also members of the disability community. And these are almost, if you add them all up, 20 plus million people who are not able to vote like the rest of us. And so I think starting there made a lot of sense to us, and that's where we focused our early 10 pilot programs on. So how can you make it easier for this demographic to vote? And if it's successful here, it's validated here, then you can take the next baby step to expand it to the next demographic, maybe college students who are away from their homes, elderly who are in a hospital, and then maybe everybody else. So definitely, that's the way to go. The situation we find ourselves in right now with the COVID situation may require us to accelerate some of that, but definitely traditionally slow is the better way to go.
Yeah, I'm curious about that acceleration. I mean, this has really become a top issue on the list of priorities for the country now, with elections coming up. How do you actually see this playing out, given what's going on with the health crisis?
I think it's a scary thought to think like what's happening right now might continue up until November, but it's a very realistic possibility, and so we definitely need to prepare for that. And because of the way our election infrastructure has been built and sort of the resistance to innovation over the last many decades, we actually now find ourselves in a situation where our system is not resilient to a kind of a natural disaster event like this, where because of our over reliance on in-person voting, now we are so struggling to find options. And the sort of the next best option being proposed is mail-in voting, which has worked in some of the states who've been doing it for a while. It's hard to jump into mass mobile voting overnight because there's a lot of preparation required. You require personnel, equipment, and so it's not. I don't think there's a single solution. I think we have to consider everything we can offer here to the voters to ensure that the turnout doesn't dip. And so mail should be on the table. Remote options using the internet should be on the table. And anything else we can come up with should also be on the table. So definitely, I think it's the time to expand, not to reduce options. I think because of a lot of the in-person voting locations, in-person voting options have gotten disrupted. Most of the inbound we are getting is about how can we move this event primarily online, or 100% online, or maybe like a hybrid online situation. And so there's a lot of uncertainty and panic and fear for good reason. And so what we are trying to encourage is to offer options where the entire election could be conducted online, or we've also rolled out some additional options for scenarios where people can vote on a phone call or can have a restricted set of vote center locations where iPads are available, and you can, as long as more than 10 people don't congregate at the same time, you can walk up touch screen on an iPad and vote as well.
Why create Voatz? What's driving you, motivating you? What's the background story for the reason that you're spending your energy on this?
We started Voatz almost by accident. My brother and I, we were at a hackathon at South by Southwest in 2014, where we ended up prototyping a new election system, and actually won the hackathon. And what really intrigued us during that process was certain childhood experiences which came to bear. We had seen people being forced to vote at gunpoint. And so when we uh, looked at the properties behind the technology being used by Bitcoin and some of the security options which were available there, kind of made sense to have a system where we could avoid the in-person coercion scenarios. And so that was one of the main motivations, sort of an accidental participation and combination of some unfortunate childhood experiences growing up.
Super interesting. Thanks so much for the time. We appreciate it, and hope you have a good rest of the day.